Over the Line Extra, your weekly Galway GAA podcast with Ollie Turner and Sean Walsh.
Over the Line Extra, and this week we're going to be chatting to Barry Cullinane about last weekend where we're listening into Galway and Cork in what, Barry, sounded like a hurling match with the scores that were going in. Pretty much every attack, either Galway or Cork were scoring. 322 was some score for Galway to put up, weren't they?
Yeah, it was brilliant, Ollie. And like I was chatting to someone on Monday and they were saying that they were in Hyde Park for Mayo and Armagh. They spoke about the level of intensity that you could nearly feel it in the stand, and that's about the Cork and Galway game. And I said, you know what, it was a really lovely game of football. So I think real contrast in styles, we say, between the two games. This was a real open, wide open pitches, loads of pace, loads of really, really good scores. The defending maybe left a lot to be desired, but as a spectacle for the small crowd that was there, it was a really, really enjoyable game of football. And when you see the likes of Sean Walsh and what he can do, worth the entrance fee alone.
Now, I mean, it's not like there was nothing to play for. I mean, let's just understand that this year's football championship, and we'll talk about next year's in a moment after Congress at the weekend, but how you perform, especially in Division 2, will have a bearing on how your championship could go.
100%. And like Cork are now in a real battle. As I said to you off air, they will feel they have an advantage and that they've probably played the best teams in the league already. So they've played Derry, Galway and Roscommon and haven't picked up any points, but they now have the likes of Offaly, Meath and Down to come. So they will hope that they will pick up points there to avoid being relegated to Division 3. And in reality, unless something miraculous happens, which previously has, Kerry will beat Cork in the first round of the championship, and if Cork were to be relegated out of the division, then they find themselves in the Tailteann Cup, and that's definitely a place either the Cork management or the Cork footballing supporters certainly don't want to be. But I would think that was never really, certainly never in Galway's thoughts at the start of the year. I think I've said this before, I think Galway are a Division 1 team. Are they a top Division 1 team? Time will tell, but I think, at the start of this, I don't think it would have been acceptable for Pádraig Joyce, and certainly not for any Galway supporter, for Galway not to perform really, really well in Division 2 and push for a promotion place. And I think with the games that the game is over them now, they will find themselves, I think if they were to get over Offaly, they'll find themselves joint top of the league. And with Roscommon and Derry to come, they'll expect to be right in the mix for promotion and back up to Division 1 to get to those level of intensity games that Mayo were playing week on week. So
from a Galway perspective then, that threat of, because they're playing Mayo in the first round as well, if Galway were to lose and if they happen to be in the bottom two in Division 2, then they would be like Cork, gone out of it. At least that's gone now, you would have to think, based on their performances in the opening 3 games. And with another chance to come, I suspect this Sunday they'll really be licking their lips with the chance that refix game with Offaly now could give them a maximum 8 points, and then really thinking about nothing other than winning the division.
Yeah, 100%. And, again, Galway will be raging hot favourites going into that game, both in terms of form and in terms of personnel, and they'll expect to get 2 points and 2 points relatively comfortably in that. And Pádraig, the 24th of April is what's on everyone's mind when they play Mayo, and the fact that they will get a second chance at it this year, I think, is really important for Galway if they weren't to beat Mayo. And that takes a little bit of the pressure off, and maybe will aid the performance on the day. And they'll be going down to Castlebar or Hyde Park, wherever the game is on, full of confidence and really wanting to take on that Mayo team. But the big advantage he has, I think, in terms of his preparation, is now, once he gets the Offaly game out of the way, he has 2 really good, tough games in preparation for that. I think if it was in the reverse, if they had played Derry and Roscommon, who we would have known were probably along with Galway, the teams that were going to push for promotion, if he had come across those in the early rounds and he maybe had a Meath and a Down or a Cork in the last couple of games, I'm not sure he would have been overly happy with that. But I think it has the run of fixtures has really suited him, and he is Offaly, providing they get over that, but he has 2 really, really good games to prepare for the 24th of April and really nail down any question marks on any positions that he has in the team.
Yeah, and Clare won't be no pushover either, and they're going well. So yeah, I mean, it's fallen nicely for him. But what about the team? I mean, we talk about Pádraig Joyce and the management team, Barry. They've had a rotten run of luck in the last couple of years. Surely they're due a little bit of good fortune, and maybe the league might be the start of that. I mean, we're actually talking about Mayo now as being next month, which it is in the championship, which is hard to credit. But how close is he to getting near his championship team?
He's very close, Ollie. I think in reality, I think everybody knows there's a gap in terms of the class between the teams in Division 2 and the teams in Division 1. And it's not, the preparation levels aren't as good for a championship being in Division 2. So you have to, if you're one of the top teams in Division 2, which Galway are, you have to make and get the most benefit out of that league. And one of the benefits that he has is that he can, because the games aren't as tough and you don't need to go to the depths of your panel as much as he would in Division 1, he can now get a shape and a structure to his team and get the units playing regularly together. So it looks like he has nailed his colours to the mast with Conor Flaherty in goal. It was a position that maybe there's been a lot of chopping and changing over the last few years. It now looks like he has his first choice number one. I think Sean Mulcairn's obviously getting injured robbed him of the probably first choice full back. Sean Kelly is in there now. Sean Kelly will probably stay there. John Daly at 6. So you have the spine of the team. Matthew Tierney, Paul Conroy looks like his number one midfield. Maybe Owen Gallagher and Paul Kelly doing, a role coming deep. And then Shane Walsh, Damien Comer, Rob Finnerty +1. Desi Keneally was there the last day, did really, really well. So overall, the shape the shape of the team is definitely falling into place. If you look at the half back line in particular, it looks now like Dylan McHugh, John Daly are certainly going to fill 2 of those spots. Killy McDade looked like he was in pole position to fill the 3rd. He's picked up a knock, keeps him out for a couple of weeks. Johnny Heaney took his chance the last day and did really, really well. And Johnny Heaney and the team certainly won't weaken it. But I would say that's when Pádraig and Cian O'Neill and John Divley and John Concannon sat down at the start of the year. I would personally say they said, out of Division 2, we want to be going into this Mayo game with our team, 14 of our team at least, nailed on, having loads of matches together, and really finding a formula that makes every player play to their optimum. And at the moment, it looks like it's going in the right direction. Yeah,
it's all very positive. And of course, the Sigerson wouldn't have done any harm either, would it, Barry, in terms of the confidence for some of those guys and how they played. And it's interesting, listening as well to Jeff Linsky talking on Monday night and over the line with the lads about the cooperation he got from Henry Shefflin. And it seems that was very much how Galway approached this in both football and hurling, that they accommodated their players pretty well. Now, the Mulcairn's injury and likewise Tommy Conroy for Mayo were unfortunate. But do you think that the Sigerson was a bit of a help in terms of getting some of those key players you've just been mentioning come into really good form early on in the year?
Fantastic help. And you have to congratulate Maurice Sheridan. He spent a lot of time with the NUIG Sigerson team and has finally got just reward for the effort that he has put in. But I'm sure I'll miss a couple of guys, but the Paul Kellys, Sean Kellys, Matthew Tierneys, these guys that were playing at the top level of, Sigerson is just a level below inter-county level, and in some matches it's probably higher than inter-county level. They're playing on the top young forwards in the country. They're training really, really well. The quality of everything is really, really good. And then the bonus of coming back in after winning the thing is the confidence that will give them all is fantastic. And, sometimes Sigerson gets a little bit of negative press. I think it's fantastic competition. Maybe I would. We won one a couple of years, a lot of years ago at this stage. But it's a really, really important competition for the development of young footballers. And this has been a brilliant year for NUIG in terms of the Sigerson. And I think Pádraig Joyce will probably be very thankful to Morris for the hard work and effort that he put in to get them to the final and winning it, because I think it can be only good for the Galway football team and Galway football in general.
So we're going to get our heads around the championship pretty quickly once it kicks off. You did hint on the fact there is a backdoor this year and Galway will be in a position to avail it because of their performances in Division 2. But what is absolutely clear now, Barry, after last weekend with Congress, is that there will be a brand new football championship to stay from next year with the green proposal, as they call it. It's not quite as radical as last October's special Congress, which was defeated, but 95% means this is pretty much across the board accepted by every county in the country and every team participating, that it's the way to go, which is pretty much in simple terms that there'll be 16 teams going for the All-Ireland once the National Leagues and the Provincial Championships are over, and the other teams then will go into the Tailteann Cup. That probably will put an added, well, there's unquestionably going to put added value to the leagues in the coming years.
Yeah, and there's going to be little kind of unforeseen consequences of that as well, in that if you are a Division 3 team or a Division 4 team, like a Tipperary or a Cavan, remember, and you get to their provincial final, then the knock-on of that means that somebody in some division in one of the provinces that would see themselves as being really important All-Ireland contenders is actually going to lose out. So you could say, hypothetically, if Dublin were to be relegated this year and were to find themselves not getting to their provincial finals next year and weren't in the top 8 teams outside of that, then they're looking at the Tailteann Cup. A long shot, but it is something that I'm sure over the coming years there's going to be a turn up for the books. But I think overall everybody felt that there had to be a change. There was too many games that were too lopsided, weren't fair competitions, and I think the most important point of it for me is if they can market the Tailteann Cup and generate the interest from the public within the counties that are going to be competing for it, then you'll really see the benefit of it. Because if you take, for example, a Leitrim or a Longford, if they see themselves with a huge opportunity of getting to Croke Park, maybe on All-Ireland final day, maybe on All-Ireland semi-final day, in front of a big crowd, you can see what that can do for a county. You looked at Leitrim; they got to a Division 4 league final a couple of years ago. It was played in Croke Park. I think most of Leitrim ended up at the match. And once you're looking at competitive games and a competition that you can win, that will generate interest. And then that also goes for the All-Ireland series. So it's going to be really, really good games. We're going to see the top teams playing each other on a regular basis. And that's what everyone wants. And if you look at the league right now, it's, to a certain extent, it's generating more interest than what the championship will until it gets down to the knockout stages, because we're seeing week on week, look at Mayo and Armagh last week, Dublin, Kerry, all of these really good competitions that we don't see in the provincial championships every year. Big crowds, lots of interest, lots of debate, and that's what we need to really drive the standard of football. And I think if it's done right, I think it can drive the standard of football in the elite and at the really top teams, but it can also drive the standard of football really high and maybe the level below that. So overall, I'm sure it'll have its faults. I'm sure it'll need tweaks along the way, but overall, a good development, and I think something that's going to be welcomed by every county, and in particular the players within those counties that that want to succeed and want to win.
I suppose you talk about elite, our final point then, Barry. We heard as well from Paul Bellew, the Galway County Board Chairman, that there was no budge from Croke Park as regards Galway getting special dispensation to allow them to continue with their own formats in the Senior Hurling and Football Championship. Now, there's much more talk in hurling than in football circles about the impact of this, because they've got to go from 24 teams down to 16. For the footballers in the championship, it's down from 18 to 16, so they already have their plans in place that we know that 2 teams will be relegated from the Senior Championship this year and 2 next year, with just the intermediate winners coming up. Does that make sense to you? I mean, is it about right that 16 is plenty for a Senior Championship in football in Galway?
In football, I think we're well served, and I think the real knock-on benefit for that is we've a really, really competitive intermediate championship, and you've commentated, Ollie, on loads of those really good intermediate finals, exciting teams that are of a really good standard, and it's pushing on, and then our intermediate teams are doing relatively well in All-Ireland phases when they go out of that competition. I think 16 is fine, and I think in fairness to the football board, they've kept things fairly tight over the last couple of years and have had a good plan in place. And I think they haven't had an issue where they've had it in the hurling over the last couple of years or previous years, where maybe teams that were supposed to be relegated didn't, and it just led to a knock-on effect from that. So I think in terms of it's going to make everything really competitive in the next couple of years. 2 teams being relegated will keep everyone on their toes, but I think overall we have a very good senior championship in Galway, and I don't think it's going to do it any harm getting it from 18 teams down to 16, and I think that the knock-on of that will be a really competitive intermediate championship, and even further down into the junior championships, you're looking at a good standard that will generate an interest from all supporters.
You're listening to the Over the Line Extra GAA podcast here on Galway Bay FM. Delighted to be joined by local referee Alan Kelly from the Rahon Newcastle Club. Alan, first of all, I'm hearing some rumours that you might be taking a bit of time out from the inter-county refereeing. Any truth in that?
Yeah, Sean, I suppose it's something that I was thinking about for a while. I suppose especially over the winter and things like that, I just decided that I might just take a step back from the reffing for a little while, maybe 6 months or 8 months, and see how things are going. I suppose it's down to an enjoyment thing. I suppose it wasn't becoming enjoyable anymore. I was probably getting a bit narky doing matches and things like that, and it was just becoming a bit of a chore, really, to go out and actually do matches, and just wasn't really enjoying it.
And that's insightful, because from a referee point of view, there's huge effort, isn't there? Huge prep going into it, and obviously the big thing at the end of it, you have to enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, reffing is a hobby, and it's not your main source of income in any shape or form. And look, I wasn't just enjoying games, and as I said, I was beginning to become ratty with players. And when a manager comes up to you after a match and says, "Is there something wrong there?" that the lads noticed it during the course of a game. I just find it's time to start thinking about it. Was I really doing this for the right reason? And look, I suppose there's a lot of other things coming up at home as well. If the kids are getting older.
Taxi is needed as well.
The taxi is needed, yeah. So, look, I suppose when you're reffing, you're gone, morning, noon and night, either between training, courses, matches. If you're not refereeing, you're doing the line. So you're constantly on the road, and, family life probably suffers a small bit for that. And, it's one thing that the COVID probably made me see, really, was that the value of family time, and we got to do a lot of things over that time with the family. So yeah, look at a few things planned over the year, so I might just sit it out for a while.
But it's a sabbatical. You don't intend to go for
no, it's
ever,
not. As I said,
and you have age on your side.
I have, yeah. Look at, as I said, I'm 43. When I spoke to Crow Park, I suppose, about this, at the start of the year, I said. They said to me, look, they're not going to retire yet, and it's not a retirement. And, when they want to come back and actually referee comes back, they're more than likely willing to take me back again. So, yeah. The
one word you use there that I'm intrigued by is when you were getting ratty with players, you're getting ratty with management. Communication is a huge part of refereeing a game. I've often when you're doing a game like us in a press box with headphones on, you don't hear. But the games that you're not doing, where you can stand on the sideline, your role is as much a kind of a director through communication as actually enforcing the rule, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And look at, players nowadays, they will try and look for that every little inch that they can get as well.
Yeah.
And players are getting cute, and they know when to come up to you and say hello and how's it going and all that. And, tap you on the back and say that you're great and you did a great decision the last time. But, they're very quick to turn around a few minutes later and give it to you the other way as well, So
the free count isn't in our favour or whatever.
Yeah. Just trying to plant a seed in your head, I suppose. But look, I suppose communication is a big aspect of refereeing, and being able to communicate well with players. And I just felt that in the last while I was starting to bite back, and that wasn't me, and it wasn't the way I like to conduct things. And I just felt that it was safer than to probably pull away for a little while, just until I get probably a bit of love back into it again,
I'm also intrigued, after a game, you talk to players, you talk to management, everyone wants to know, how did it go? How did we do? What we did right? What we didn't do right? That's the same for you guys, isn't it? You're never heard from after a game, but when you leave that pitch, I'm sure you're looking for a kind of an endorsement. Did we get the big decisions right too in the game?
Yeah, look, I suppose I was always the one person I would be very self-critical of myself anyway, and you probably know as well. I would have spoken to you after you calling a game, to see how
get an insight,
into a decision I may have made during the course of a game. I was always very self-critical of my own refereeing, and took it very seriously in that regard. Look, as I said, we don't get a chance to probably voice our views on things after a game, but we do probably self-analysis ourselves, and at national level and things like that, you have an advisor who will come back to you and let you know on little mistakes or little tweaks that you might have to do for the next game. And I will always try and go back over a game as well, especially if a game that's on television. I would go back over it that night and, have a look at it in the next couple of weeks as well, leading into your next game, and prep for your next game. And
talk to us a little about, you were assessed. I mean, as I often say, a player can do certain things, a manager can do certain things, but you're actually assessed in terms of your performance in a game. Now, you're at pains to point out as well that that's not always negative either.
No, I suppose assessment is probably the wrong word. They used to use assessment. They've changed it now to an advisory type of a role. So, people have this myth about the guy in the stand, and the referees are trying to impress this guy in the stand. But you're not actually. He's there for your benefit. He's there to help you. I suppose maybe pick up little things that you might have missed, or way that you were performing during the course of the game that might better you the next day that you go to referee. That's his sole function, really.
Talk to us then about, we said, the big decisions, and I'm just going to use one in the past week. We saw Cian Lynch sent off in the Fitzgibbon final a week ago or so. We saw during the week that the red card was rescinded. I think everyone was of the opinion that correctly so, but that's a huge call. Now, you yourself have been in the eye of the storm, which was the Waterford Tip game famously in the Munster Championship or whatever. Talk to us about how the referee feels. The decision is made on field. In the Cian Lynch case, I suppose Fergal Horgan worked on Sean Cleare's advice from the line. But immediately after that game, what goes through the minds of the referee and the officials?
Yeah, look, I suppose in relation to the Cian Lynch one, I suppose no one is feeling worse off than Sean Cleare this week.
Yeah, the linesman.
Yeah, the linesman. Ultimately, it looked like it was him that influenced the decision for Fergal, or for Fergal to make the red card or give the red card. And I spoke to Sean earlier in the week, and Sean was fairly in a bad spot after that. And look, I've been there myself. As you said, the Waterford game a couple of years ago. It did probably come back a couple of times over the course of the year. As RTE did their programme at the end of the year, and you saw you were
featured again.
So I suppose it's not really a nice experience, to have to go through something like that. And I know, I had trusted umpires who probably pulled away as a result of that Waterford game. And none of us went down to the Gaelic grounds that day to make those decisions or to come away from it like that. No more than Sean at the weekend. Sean went down to do line. He made a call on something that he saw, and he didn't get a second chance to look at it. And hopefully down the line, referees will get a chance to maybe go down the likes of the rugby side of things and get a chance to have a second look at it.
Yeah, two things. Let's hold that thought for a second. But the other thing is that you do get a lot of abuse as a referee. It's hard or people don't think that you have family, you have a wife, you have kids, the umpires have family. There's a lot of stick flying when a big decision like that goes wrong, isn't there?
There is, and I suppose it's very easy for people to sit behind a phone and type away and not think about the consequences of it down the line, for the person. Or, I've had that through social media. I've had it through the written post.
Nice letters,
postcards coming to the house. I know the famous Pat Spillane story, but I've got them delivered to me too, and telling me how bad I was in games, and with family, as I said, I have young kids there too. My eldest is nearly 18, and she's on social media and things like that. She doesn't need to be reading this kind of stuff, So it's not nice in that regard,
Two aspects, I suppose. There's 7 of you actually on the pitch at a time. How difficult or how easy is it to get everyone working together? Or is that a trust thing that you build up with your own team after a while? I mean the linesmen and the umpires.
I suppose it is a trust thing. The lads that I would have had done umpires are all, very good friends of mine, would do all the games with me, really. The club games here in Galway and the inter-county games. So, I would trust. If they told me that something had happened in front of them, I would take as gospel what they were after telling me. You have to trust then, obviously, the linesmen that are part of your team. They're referees, qualified referees as well. And, they provide you with information, you have to act on it.
So hence, going back to the Fitzgibbon final, when Fergal Horgan is told by Sean Cleare, listen, something happened here, it's worth the red card, he's trusting that information.
Well, we always kind of tell, I wouldn't, or it's a kind of a done thing between referees and linesmen and things like that. You would never tell a referee give a red card or give a yellow card.
Okay, right.
You would actually tell them what you saw,
right,
and let him decide what card he wants to give.
Okay.
And Sean obviously told Fergal what he saw, and Fergal made the decision based on that.
Right, and you mentioned review, and this is an interesting thing because I know Niall Cannon and myself were chatting about that as well. On the results of all this, we see the red card was rescinded. Obviously, NUIG would argue strongly that impacted the way that they fell away in the game or whatever. But either way, the review system. I mean, we see VAR in the Premiership, Alan. You're not going to get a VAR system in the Junior C1 game between Rahon Newcastle and Turlough on a Tuesday evening in Carnmore. But is there scope for a review system of some sort?
I believe so. I would be cautious how we would use it. I suppose if you take maybe key game decisions, red cards, the calls for scores, obviously back to my Waterford game again, if it was there that day, it would have been ideal. Another one would be whether a player was fouled inside or outside the large rectangle. Obviously the penalty, it's a penalty or it's a free from the 20-metre line. So, they're key game decisions in the course of a game, and the same with a red card. We see it in the rugby. It doesn't take an awful lot of time. I know people in the GAA are very slow to probably make changes, but and you're never going to keep everybody happy either. But I still think that there is room for it there, but to be used probably sparingly. I know. We spoke. You
chatted about Boston. Was it the what was that? The tournament in Boston? Wasn't it?
The Super 11s a number of years ago, which probably was the grounds for a number of rule changes which we've seen in the GAA, I suppose, in the last couple of years. One of them being the yellow sliotar. That was first trialled at the Super 11s.
The yellow sliotar,
yellow sliotar. Right, another one would have been probably the penalty, and the penalty 1-on-1. That was first trialled back in 2013 out in Chicago at the Super 11s. So one that we used, I suppose, in Boston was the video ref, and we used it for one incident in particular where a ball took a deflection off the goalkeeper and it went out for the short corner as they were using for that particular game. And on the field, I was unaware of whether it took a deflection or not.
Right.
Christy Brown, the other referee from Galway, was actually up in the box, and he was able to pull it up on the large screen inside in the ground, and within 10 to 15 seconds I had a result of what I was looking for.
Okay, so you saw it on the replay.
On the big screen, so the decision would be able to be made that we were going with the short corner for that particular incident.
And that's an enormous potential advantage to a referee, isn't it? I get what you're saying. I mean, in the GAA, everything is slow. But then at the same time, if you look in the last 15 years, there's a number of things that have come into the GAA. So maybe this is the next one that could be trialled, if not anything else.
As I said, look, there is scope for it. I don't know, how feasible it will be in every venue. But look, we have cameras at most games nowadays. If you look, even our Fitzgibbon, there's been serious coverage of the Fitzgibbon on YouTube and everything in the last couple of weeks. So there is cameras at games. So look, I think if we can use it at all, it would definitely be a benefit to the referee.
Another thing that came out of the Fitzgibbon, and look at if the review system comes out, and I know there's probably a lot of people listening to us and they're saying it won't happen, lads, but it probably will in time. The other thing that came out of the game was the hand pass, Alan, which must be one of the bugbears of every referee. How do you decipher? I mean, what does the rules say? A definitive striking action, but these guys are going at such pace and movement.
Yeah, I think if you will even look, I suppose, in the warm-ups that most teams are doing nowadays, they're always throwing the ball. Yeah, do you know what I mean? So
it's on the verge of it. Anyway,
it is on the verge of it. Yeah. Look, it's a very hard one to call. Definitely. I probably had an example of it in my earlier days at national refereeing. It was back in about, I think if you remember the game where Cork were on strike and they came back to play Clare.
Yes.
That was one of my first National League matches to do. And it was down in Ennis. Ronan Kern was maybe 15, 20 yards away from me. And I pulled him for what I thought was a legal hand pass. That time, if you remonstrated with a referee for any particular reason,
you moved it up.
You were sin binned.
Oh, right.
So Ronan duly remonstrated over the decision and said that he didn't throw the ball, and I gave him the sin binning. And I went home that night, and Elaine had been watching it at home, and she said, "You better take another look at this." And he didn't throw the ball.
Right.
So I went up to Ronan. I met Ronan a couple of weeks later at another game, and I said to him, I have to apologise for sin binning you a few weeks ago. I said I was totally wrong, and he says, "When? What was that about? Can't remember."
He had forgotten.
He had forgotten about it.
Yeah. But I mean, it is something. I don't think you can just implement it now. There's going to have to be some definitive tying up of the rule that what you need to do, because I mean, if you went at every single hand pass, you could nearly review every single hand pass in the game, couldn't you?
Yeah, and that's where I don't think that the actual video referee would work for that type of thing.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? If we went down that line, I think we would be, we'd be going down nearly American football type.
Yeah, and again during the commentary of the Fiscal Final, we made the comment that often at the start of the year, the certain rules almost seem to be looked at in league games early on, and by the time the championship comes, it's back to normal. Is that a fair comment to make as well? That certain things.
Well, I think look, it may not be just focused on. I suppose the hand pass, would have been looked at probably in the early rounds of the league by Croke Park, and would have said the lads, you constantly have meetings. You have meetings every 2 to 3 weeks at this time of the year. So, they would have seen that the hand pass would have been coming an issue in the first couple of rounds, and probably I could imagine they just told the lads to just keep an eye on it and make sure that they start pulling those hand passes.
So we look forward to it as the year develops. Finally, I suppose, Alan, refereeing, it's not the easiest thing to get lads involved in. Now, we started here. Your loss is obviously going to be felt now for the period of time that you're out. When a player retires, I often remark, he'll go into management, he'll go into underage, he'll go coaching, but the refereeing route isn't the most sexy route, is it?
No, someone said to me there during the week, it's nearly gone like the priesthood. It's going to be very hard to attract lads to go into it. Look, I suppose it takes a certain type of individual to referee, and it's not everyone's cup of tea. But I see it being a problem in the next couple of years, both nationally and locally. I suppose trying to attract lads to do it. I'm involved there with Mike and Lee, in the coaching and kind of the, maybe the foundation levels of courses for referees. And we can see over the last number of years the numbers have been dwindling, and even those who are willing to maybe take it up are more senior. And which is not what you want. You realistically need to see someone taking this up at a young age of 20, 21, 22, and progressing on. There is a pathway. Like me myself, I was what, my early 20s when I took it up, and it's my own career progressed quite rapidly. Like I think it was 2004 I started refereeing, and by 2007, I'd refereed my first county final in Galway.
Yeah, which is rapid.
Which, and then, the following year I was on the national panel, and, before too long you were refereeing at a championship level in Ireland. You know what I mean? So
what you're saying effectively is that there is, if for some person, man or woman, that wants to get involved in it, there is a pathway to improve yourself.
There is a pathway if you want to do it, but you have to want to do it.
Yeah.
I see some clubs there, they send a referee in, or a person in to do the referee's course just to say that they have a referee on the books.
Yeah.
That's not the right way to be. You have to really want it, and that's probably why I pulled away this in the last couple of weeks, is because I'm saying not pulling away temporary pulling away.
Yeah.
It's just that I didn't have the drive for it at the moment, and you have to have the drive and the want to do it.
And I suppose that's no different than your player, than your manager, than even a club officer or whatever. You have to have the drive, don't you?
Yeah, you have to have the drive, and you have to have the want to go out and do the games, and that's what keeps lads interested in it, really.
Well, Alan, look, it's been a pleasure talking to you. As we say, the fact that you're stepping down for a while, we hope that is only a sabbatical for a period or whatever. But again, I think for what the whole idea of this discussion on our podcast, our GAA podcast here in Galway FM, is just to get an insight of the referee side of things as well. And look, thanks for joining us here, and we wish you the best of luck with the temporary break.
No problem. Thanks very much, Sean.
Over the Line Extra, your weekly Galway GAA podcast with Ollie Turner and Sean Walsh.